There are so many questions to be answered when you are going through a divorce, but one that looms the largest is, how do I find my own identity after the divorce? Hi, welcome to your Fab Talk with Lauren and Lori. I'm Lori, your love and relationship coach.
And I am Lauren, your becoming coach, and together we are your FAB divorce coaches. Lori and I get together every week and talk about topics that are on the minds of our clients. And we know because they tell us, so they let us know what they want to talk about. And we want to hear from you too. If there's something you want to talk about, please drop it in the comments and we'll make sure to work it in. And hit like and subscribe so that you can always stay up to date on these conversations that I know you're going to find important because it's what everybody wants to talk about when they are going through a divorce. So, hey,
Yes.
Lori.
Hey, good to see
Good
you.
to see you.
You know what? Today we are going to be talking about, and I know we didn't talk much about it before, but here we are in this conversation. Today we are going to talk about, how do we find our own identity again once we get through divorce? And that was a big question when I knew that my marriage was complete and it was time for me to move on. That was one of the questions that really just stopped me in my tracks. It's like, who am I now? I had spent more of my adult life with a title of Mrs. and more of my adult life as a Woolridge than a Bryant. And now, it was, who am I? The lawyer's asking me, do I want to, go back to my maiden name? And it was a really, really confusing time. And I had to decide I needed to make space in this whole divorce process to begin this, taking the steps to redefine myself, um, what I was going to be, who was I becoming after the divorce was over.
It's the essential question, right? And it's so much of what we cover in your Fab Divorce because this is part of reclaiming yourself. Like a big part of dealing with the emotional side of divorce is reclaiming yourself, standing in your truth, standing in your light, however you want to think about it. That sounds like something motivating to you. But so many of my clients talk about having lost themselves when they've been married. They sort of have subsumed themselves to the role of wife or mother, forgetting like what kinds of things they really enjoy doing. And any transition, but I think especially divorce, is such an opportunity. We don't think about it that way. We just think, oh my God, this is such a big deal and this is so hard. But this is part of like readjusting your mindset. It's such an opportunity to
Yeah.
think about who you are becoming. Who do you want to be? What do you love? What do you value? What do you want your life to look like? Like all of those are questions that you can now have the space to answer.
One thing that's got to be made clear though is, unlike any other time of my life where I redefined myself, this one was way different. Like when I changed careers, when I went from television production to writing, that was a redefinition of myself as a professional. But what's really different about this is that you're not just leaving your marriage and the role and the title. You are actually leaving behind a shared history. You're leaving behind a life and a lifestyle that has been influenced by that vow you took, that I was going to becoming one, and this was until death do us part, and I was going to love and honor these vows. So there's so many different areas where you are beginning to feel like, um, brings on a lot of the different emotions like guilt and shame and all those things, because it feels like you're breaking vows. You're declaring yourself, or it's been declared for you that now you have to be somebody else and you don't know how that works. So the first thing I have to tell everybody is, this takes time. It takes time to figure out who you are. It's not a quick and easy answer, because again, you have been labeled, you've labeled yourself as a particular person within this particular team. And so you're leaving behind a lot. And as you shed skin, it's not an easy process.
It's not an easy process. And I love that you're reminding people that it is a process. And that's so important. I mean, and there are moments in your life, you're saying like when you've left a divorce or, a job or something that, it doesn't hit quite the same way as the attachment that you decided to make and now is being torn apart. And, so for full disclosure, if anybody hasn't been watching, I have not been divorced. I am part of this duo as the becoming coach, which is why that's my focus, right? Always. And all of us, regardless of what our life is bringing us, regardless of what the circumstances are, we're always in that process of becoming. But I know that I've had major shifts in my life. I mean, I had not just changed jobs, but I stopped working. For 20 years, I was home, and that became my self-definition. And I was constantly looking for myself during that period of time. I took charge of everything. I ran every volunteer opportunity there was to run. And people always said, thank you for all of your effort. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm doing this kind of selfishly. Like, yeah, sure, it's nice to help the kids or, to help the community. But honestly, I needed to look for that self-definition. Who am I now that I'm not a psychologist, right? Who am I now? So it was a huge shift for me. And then when I went back to work and I became a coach, that was another huge shift. And I think the biggest one that I had in my life, like, even though it was positive, it was really difficult. And it brought up a whole bunch of fears and self-doubts and ways of looking at myself that made me feel less than, as I was comparing myself to people who'd been doing this for years and years and years. And I think that it is important to take the time to mourn the change and what was, and examine the feelings that are coming up. They all are information. Feelings don't have to be scary. Feelings, they're temporary. They don't last forever, and they give us information. So exploring that really does give you a jumping off point to start to redefine yourself.
One of the things that we always say, and is a big part of the course curriculum, is how is this being done for me, not to me? And that is literally one of the first questions I asked once I decided, okay, how am I going to make this work for me? And it is absolutely true. And you mentioned earlier how it's such an opportunity. And if you really think about it, most of us, and I can almost guarantee you that whoever you are listening to this, you have never taken the opportunity to really look at yourself, look at what you want, look at who you want to be, and make practical and concerted effort to become that person. Because most of us live our lives following roles and the rules of the roles that are set out for you. So finding your own identity after divorce can be a real gift. It is a real gift if you choose to look at it this way.
Yeah, I mean, so here's one of the things, like, for anybody, like at any time in your life, looking at what is story, what is it that we think is true about ourselves, but is really just a story that we tell ourselves, versus truly exploring who we are and who we want to be. And again, this is a breaking open point, right? Divorce is a breaking open, and it feels very raw. But again, there's that opportunity there to look for what are the stories you've been telling yourself about who you are, because they're just stories. Or maybe they were a story that came to a completion and you're ready to write a new chapter. This is part of looking at what the opportunity is, but like letting go of the stories that don't serve you any longer and recognizing, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to be that person who always gave away my choice, even for something as small as what are we having for dinner tonight or what movie are we going to watch? Like, that's just a story that people maybe won't value you if you actually voice an opinion, right? So this is, again, it's all opportunity. It feels like something's being taken away. But as Lori's talking about looking at what happens for you, you can really reframe this as something being given to you. This is such an opportunity. Doesn't mean it's comfortable, right? Growing and changing and finding ourselves isn't necessarily comfortable, but it is a huge opportunity that ultimately will feel amazing once you get there.
Amen. And I can attest to that. I have never felt better about me or my life than when I decided to accept the fact that it is what it is. Now, how am I going to make this the best for me, with them included? And I think that's an important first step. Well, second step. The first step is to decide that this is being done for me. So I'm going to figure out who is it that I want to be based on what do I want, and what kind of life do I want to lead post divorce. So that's step number one. But step number two is understanding that your title can be whatever you want it to be. So, one of the things I decided to do after determining that this was being done for me is, instead of trying to find a new title for me, I decided to give him a new title. And that started because I was hearing people talk about their exes, my ex-wife, my ex-husband. It wouldn't roll off my tongue in a way that felt natural and wasn't dismissive. And why that's important is because setting mindset, right? What is my divorce vision? We've talked about that before. How did I want my divorce to look? How did I want my afterlife to look? And setting up my identity through how I was going to identify him became a real driver. So I decided, well, I didn't like X. So what could I call him? And I ended up with the term "wasbin" because
I love that.
he was my husband. So now he's my husband. And that became important because identifying him as my husband kept our split, in a more respectful space, because I was honoring the fact that he had played an important role in my life. He was the father of my children, and whether it was good or bad, it was just as important that he helped push me forward into the place where now I was in this space where I was forced to grow, where I was forced to evolve into the next best version of myself. And taking that compassionate, kind intention into my redefinition was important, because it was about who I wanted to be based on my terms, not who I thought I had become based on a victim role, or something that had happened that was hurtful and hard and traumatic and all that stuff. So sometimes it's a matter of identifying yourself through the concept of who you want to be versus the hard, easily identifiable items that you want to list as your character attributes. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And, and some people will be able to like relate to having that compassion for their husband, their former partner. And some people might still be working on getting to that place. And again, that's something that we work on in the FAB divorce. And not to say that you absolutely have to get there, because there is no right or wrong way to do this. There's only what's going to be right for you and the timing for you. But what I do like about that is thinking of this person as somebody who had an important place in your life, that you're elevating them to husband and not just dismissively Xing them out, also gives you more access to compassion for yourself. And, I think that when you're looking for who you are, starting with, I am somebody who can hold myself in compassion. I am somebody who can love myself regardless of the road that I've taken and the choices that I've made. You're getting past guilt and shame, which we all have. Even it's often what's under the anger, right? Is stuff even that's pointing at ourselves, to say, what, I did the best that I can. I'm somebody who can give myself credit for having done the best I can. And I deserve to be happy.
Yeah.
And I deserve to redefine myself. And I deserve to rise to whatever I want to rise to. And I think that I love the husband thing because it does open that compassion window a little bit. And that's so important when you're on this exploration, on this mission of finding out who you are. Just always remembering to give yourself grace and compassion, I think, is so important.
And it's also important, that compassion and the grace, and then again, that retitling is part of who you're trying to re-identify yourself as within your social setting, your social status, your social group. And by keeping that compassion, identifying myself as that a compassion was wife and him I was Ben, it kept the negative noise down. Because remember, part of what I was hearing around me when other people talked about their ex was how horrible they were, how, the horrible things they had done. And I'm so glad to get them out of our life. And energy is contagious, and you feed off of that. So people trying to be supportive and continue telling you, to be on your side. You're right. He was this, he was that, it was this. It almost is like a foot on your neck, keeping you in the pile of slush of negativity. So redefining his title, and then using that compassion to walk through my social circles. People were like, she's okay, then I'm okay. So it didn't become the constant noise about how I was wrong and it's so bad and da 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 da. And that really helps you clear the cobwebs and the fear fog and all of that, so that you can begin to see who you want to become, identify yourself as, through this all. So it's a really important thing that works on both sides.
It's also an opportunity to really take a good look at those social relationships that you had as a couple and decide who is an uplifter that you really want in your life and who is an anchor that you could really do without. Because again, this transition point is a time where you can really separate that out. And I would love to have a deep conversation about that. Maybe our next show. Stay tuned. We'll see. And if there's something that you want to hear more about, really drop it in the comments, because we want to know what's important to you. The reason we do this is to kind of create community. So if you hear something, please comment. Please, if you agree or if you disagree, if you want to add your 2 cents, we'd love to hear from you. Please drop it in the comments, and let's make this a community, because we are all stronger when we go through these things together.
Definitely. And if you have questions that you want us to chat about, please feel free to drop those in there too. So until the next time, I want you to please remember that developing your own identity as your own person through compassion and kindness and love is the way you're going to flourish in your freedom. So we will see you next time.
See you next time.
I don't really know what comes next. I'm just doing